The world has grown older, colder, and quieter, and somewhere on the outskirts of this silent earth lives a man who has spent a lifetime running not from others, but from himself. The jungle around him remains untouched by time, but the man who walks through it carries decades of scars, earned from battles that no ordinary soul could ever withstand. His strength is undeniable, his presence formidable, yet his heart beats with the slow exhaustion of someone who never asked to become a legend. This is where he hides, or perhaps this is where he waits, at the edge of Thailand, deep inside a land where the river flows like a truth that refuses to be drowned. He stays away from the world, not to protect himself, but to protect others from the storm that lives inside him. For him, violence is not a choice. It is a memory, a shadow, a legacy he cannot wash from his hands no matter how hard he tries. His days pass in repetition, simple but heavy, like the rhythm of a man who has already accepted that he might never outrun the ghosts following him. Hunting snakes, repairing boats, avoiding unnecessary conversations, every action is an attempt to remain small, unseen, unimportant. But men like him are never invisible for long. Destiny has a way of finding those who try hardest to escape it. The land surrounding him trembles with conflict. Across the border in Burma, oppression tightens its grip with merciless cruelty. Villages burn, families disappear, and soldiers march with the confidence of monsters who have forgotten the meaning of humanity. Yet even in all this darkness, small sparks of hope attempt to survive. There are people, unarmed, determined, innocent, who believe they can help, who believe that compassion is stronger than bullets. And these people inevitably find their way to the man who wants nothing to do with war, but understands it better than anyone alive. Their arrival interrupts the quiet routine Rambo built like a fragile shelter around himself. They come not with weapons, but with sincerity, speaking about their mission to bring supplies, medicine, faith, and comfort to the tortured people of Burma. In their eyes, he sees a purity that feels foreign, almost impossible. They ask for passage, believing the river is just water, believing the jungle is simply trees. They do not understand that the land they wish to cross is soaked with blood, that every shadow could be a gun barrel waiting to end a life. Inside Rambo, two instincts collide. One tells him to refuse, to keep the peace he barely managed to build. The other reminds him that peace bought by ignoring suffering is not peace at all. He stands on the shoreline, watching these strangers who have not yet been crushed by reality. Their conviction stirs something inside him, a memory of the young man he once was, the man who fought not for orders, not for medals, but for the belief that some battles must be fought even when they cannot be won. When he finally agrees to take them upriver, it is not a choice born of hope. It is a choice born of a silent, aching truth. When innocent people step into hell, someone has to walk beside them. The journey begins with the river stretching endlessly ahead, moving like a dark thread stitching together lands scarred by war. The current is slow, but beneath its calm surface lies danger waiting to rise without warning. Rambo guides the boat with the unspoken expertise of someone who has navigated more than rivers, someone who has survived the currents of war, trauma, and loss. As the boat glides deeper into enemy territory, the atmosphere thickens. The jungle no longer feels alive. It feels like a graveyard camouflaged in green, holding the echoes of unheard screams. Rambo senses the presence of danger long before the missionaries notice anything. His instincts sharpen, muscles tighten, and his mind returns to the same state that once kept him alive in lands far different, yet painfully similar. Violence may not be visible yet, but it breathes through the trees with unsettling patience. The missionaries observe the world around them with horror and disbelief. They see burned fields, deserted homes, and the silent remnants of lives shattered by brutality. Rambo watches their reactions quietly, as if trying to understand how people still manage to carry idealism like a torch that refuses to go out. But he knows that torches can attract the darkness they want to illuminate. And darkness arrives sooner than expected. On the riverbank, a group of pirates emerges, radiating threats like animals scenting weakness. They are not soldiers, not patriots, only predators looking for prey. Their demand is clear, even without words. They want to take the missionaries, destroy whatever purity they carry, and leave their bodies as forgotten warnings on the sand. Rambo feels the familiar surge of violence rise within him like a dormant beast awakened by danger. He does not want to fight. He does not want to unleash the part of himself he buried. But survival does not care about desire. It cares only about necessity. In the single moment that determines life or death, Rambo acts with the same cold precision that has defined his existence. It is not rage. It is not fury. It is instinct, the instinct of a man who has learned that hesitation is death. The pirates fall quickly, silently, without ceremony. The missionaries recoil in shock, unable to grasp that the man they trusted is more storm than shelter. Yet they do not understand that without his choice, their fate would have been far worse. Rambo sees the fear in their eyes, not the fear of the pirates, but fear of him. And that fear is something he recognizes too well. It follows him everywhere he goes. It reminds him why he isolated himself in the first place. Violence may save lives, but it also destroys the soul of the one forced to wield it. He carries that burden once again, heavier than before. When the journey continues, the boat feels cramped, not because of space, but because of silence. The missionaries avoid his gaze, wrestling with the truth they just witnessed. Still, they press forward with their mission, believing that mercy has a place even in war. Rambo remains behind them physically, but emotionally he returns to a battlefield he hoped he had left forever. By the time they reach the village, the tension becomes a quiet dread crawling through the air. The people there live in constant terror, forced to hide their identities, their families, even their dreams. Rambo watches them with a mixture of sorrow and anger. The same anger he once felt in lands far away, where innocent people suffered because powerful men demanded it. The missionaries begin their work, offering medical assistance, food, and hope. But hope is fragile here, and like all fragile things, it soon shatters. Night falls like a curtain hiding an approaching nightmare. The Burmese soldiers arrive with the efficiency of death itself, leaving no room for mercy, no hesitation in their cruelty. They sweep through the village like fire, tearing apart everything in their path. Rambo watches the horror unfold, his fists clenched, jaw tight, heart pounding with a familiar ache. He had warned them. He knew this would happen. But witnessing the truth is different than knowing it. In that burning landscape of screams and gunfire, something within him shifts. He no longer sees the present. He sees every war he fought, every comrade he lost, every cruelty he survived, and he realizes that no matter how far he runs, he will never escape the part of him that was shaped by battle, because the world, even after decades, still creates the same monsters, still destroys the same innocence. And a man like him, someone carved by war, cannot simply watch. He must choose again. To act. To fight. To become the weapon the world fears. Not to destroy, but to protect. The flames reflect in his eyes, illuminating the return of the warrior he tried so hard to bury. And once he rises, the path ahead becomes inevitable. This is where part 1 ends, with the storm that is Rambo awakening once more, preparing to step into the chaos he never wanted, but was born to endure.
The night after the mercenaries and the missionaries vanish into the jungle scorched by violence, the world around them seems to tighten like a fist closing slowly, silently, but with a force that promises no mercy. The air is thick, not only with humidity, but with the lingering echoes of what they witnessed, an echo that clings to the skin, to the breath, to the memory. No one speaks, but the silence itself becomes a language carved out of dread and disbelief. Even the most seasoned among them feel the weight of what lies ahead, a weight born from recognizing that they've stepped into a conflict shaped not by simple cruelty, but by a methodical, calculated brutality. John Rambo walks slightly apart from the group, blending into the jungle as though he were carved from the same shadow that hangs over the leaves. The night hides the expressions on his face, but the posture of his body, the steadiness, the rigid calm, reveals a man resisting the pull of old instincts. Every footstep he takes along the muddy terrain is measured, etched with memories of places that once looked and sounded exactly like this one, places where life could be extinguished by a whisper, a mistake, or even a heartbeat out of rhythm. He forces himself to move forward, knowing that turning back offers nothing but surrender to a violence he cannot erase. The mercenaries behind him shift with the unease of men who realize too late that what they initially believed would be a simple extraction is instead a descent into an underworld with no clear map, no predictable enemy, no promise of survival. Their leader, hardened by years of carrying out missions in unseen corners of the world, looks ahead and studies Rambo with a growing sense of reluctance. He understands now that the man leading them walks with the fluency of someone who has lived his entire life within the borders of war. And while the mercenaries are confident, skilled, and brutal when required, they now recognize that they're navigating a landscape where brutality is not a tool, it's the baseline. The jungle itself seems to shift as dawn struggles to break through the canopy. Mist coils like smoke, weaving between the towering trees and settling into the trails like a warning not to tread any further. But necessity overrides fear. Rambo moves with precision, following signs etched into the terrain: broken leaves, displaced mud, the faint impressions of boots belonging to soldiers who dragged prisoners with cruel efficiency. The further they travel, the more apparent it becomes that the soldiers responsible for the massacre earlier are not merely patrolling, but conducting something closer to a purge. Time moves sluggishly as they press through the dense foliage. Every rustle, every uneven breath, every distant crack echoes like a possible threat. The mercenaries attempt to suppress their tension, but it leaks through their steady movements in small, fractured gestures: the tightening of a jaw, a sharper inhale, a reflexive glance over the shoulder. They're trained for danger, but not for this kind of unseen, omnipresent oppression. Rambo hears everything, senses everything, feels the jungle's pulse pressing against his skin. He knows the pattern of impending ambush the same way one knows the rising of the sun: inevitable, predictable, and merciless. And then, it happens. The world around them erupts with sudden violence. The first sounds are not screams or gunfire, but the whisper of a trap snapping open. Leaves burst upward as hidden wires jerk violently. Wooden spikes swing down with lethal speed. A mercenary attempts to react, but falls too quickly, his body collapsing into the mud with a dull, final thud. The explosion that follows is small, but devastating, shredding the peace of the morning. Rambo drops to the ground instinctively, his senses narrowing, his breath steady. The jungle becomes chaos, bullets slicing through branches, soldiers shouting commands, the mercenaries scrambling to take cover. Rambo's mind returns instantly to the cold clarity of combat. He moves without hesitation, without fear, without the tremble of uncertainty. He knows this terrain better than the men who designed the traps. He crawls through the brush, using the roots and shadows as shields. calculating angles and anticipating enemy positions with the experience of a man shaped by war rather than trained by it. He observes patterns in the gunfire, the spacing of the soldiers' movements, the subtle shift of leaves that reveal positions before bullets do. The mercenaries struggle, their formation fractured by the sudden ambush. Some fire blindly, others desperately attempt to regroup. Their leader, while skilled, is overwhelmed by the precision of the attack. These soldiers were not acting on instinct. They were operating with the cold discipline of a regime that uses terror as both strategy and religion. Rambo eliminates threats silently and efficiently, taking out soldiers one by one with a brutality that feels less like anger and more like inevitability. Every motion he makes is deliberate, shaped by decades of surviving battles no one else walked out of. When the ambush subsides, the jungle returns to an eerie stillness. Bodies lie scattered across the ground, mixed with fragments of uniforms and splinters of wooden traps. The mercenaries breathe heavily, some trembling despite their attempts to appear composed. The weight of what happened settles upon them, thick and suffocating. They realize that without Rambo, they would have been wiped out in mere minutes. The leader looks at him, and though no words pass between them, the message is clear. This man is no ordinary soldier. He carries an instinct honed not through training manuals, but through a lifetime of wading through death. As they press on, the atmosphere grows heavier, darker. They discover paths lined not with footprints, but with the remnants of violence too painful to name. Burned structures, abandoned clothing, shattered belongings of those who fled too late. The deeper they move into the jungle, the more evident it becomes that the soldiers they encountered are not merely enforcing power, they are cleansing the region of anyone who defies them. The traces of suffering become more visceral. Makeshift cages, freshly extinguished fires, half-dug pits, remnants of prayer offerings scattered in panic. These sights ignite something within Rambo that he hasn't felt since the aftermath of war. The echo of a familiar rage, shaped not by hatred, but with a deep, unyielding refusal to let cruelty go unanswered. The mercenaries feel it too, though theirs manifests as unease rather than purpose. They recognize that they have entered a realm governed by unrestrained brutality, and while they are efficient killers when necessity demands it, they do not possess the resolve required to confront a force that thrives on suffering. Hours pass before they reach the river, where the missionaries were last believed to have been taken. The water moves slowly, coated with debris that drifts downstream like forgotten memories. Rambo kneels, studying the patterns on the riverbank. He notices subtle disturbances, drag marks, faded prints, broken reeds. His gaze hardens slightly. The signs point towards a camp nearby, one hidden but not unreachable. The mercenaries gather behind him, exhaustion settling into their muscles, but fear fueling their urgency. As they follow the path indicated by the river's clues, the distant sounds of human suffering travel through the air. Muffled cries, harsh commands, the clanking of metal against wood. The soldiers responsible for the ambush are part of something larger, something mercilessly organized. Rambo observes the perimeter of the camp through foliage so thick it almost masks the horror unfolding within. Through gaps in the leaves he sees prisoners forced into labor, guards pacing with relaxed confidence, weapons slung carelessly over their shoulders. The mercenaries study the camp with grim expressions, calculating risks and odds. Their leader shakes his head subtly. A frontal assault would be suicide. The camp is too fortified, too heavily patrolled, too entrenched in violence to be approached with traditional methods. But Rambo is no stranger to impossible odds. He analyzes the weaknesses, the blind spots created by torch placement, the patrol rhythm that leaves brief gaps, the natural cover formed by river reeds, and the slight elevation along the camp's southern edge. He understands immediately what must be done, not because he wants to be a hero, he abandoned such illusions long ago, but because survival, justice, and responsibility now bind him to the fate of those imprisoned inside. He sees himself in their suffering, recognizes echoes of his own past carved into their expressions. This realization hardens the resolve already rising within him. The mercenaries prepare for a brutal confrontation, but Rambo signals for restraint, indicating a path along the outskirts where they can position themselves strategically. The leader hesitates, but finally nods, trusting the instincts of a man who moves like a shadow born from conflict. As night descends again, the jungle becomes a sea of sound, chirping insects, rustling leaves, distant howls, and beneath all of it, the quiet fury brewing within Rambo. He moves into position, blending with the darkness, becoming indistinguishable from the jungle itself. Every element of his surroundings becomes a tool, a branch for concealment, mud for camouflage, stones for stability. He knows that this night will be drenched in violence, but he also knows that hesitation will cost more lives. The mercenaries wait, tension coiling in their chests, knowing that they are about to witness a level of warfare they've never encountered before. The camp's guards grow comfortable in their patterns, oblivious to the storm gathering in the shadows just beyond their lights. They laugh, drink, pace lazily. They do not sense the silence sharpening around them, do not feel the gaze of a man who has walked through wars more savage than their imagination could conjure. Rambo steadies his breath, his pulse slow, his vision clear. The moment he moves, the night will fracture into chaos. The moment he strikes, the balance of power will shift violently. And the moment he steps into that camp, the fate of the imprisoned missionaries and the fate of the soldiers guarding them will be rewritten with ruthless certainty.
The jungle, which only moments ago had echoed with bullets, explosions, and the screams of dying soldiers, now fell into an eerie silence. Smoke drifted between the broken trees. The river, disturbed by the chaos, carried red-stained water downstream. And there, in the middle of it all, stood John Rambo, exhausted, wounded, but unbroken. His chest rose and fell heavily. His hands were trembling from adrenaline and blood loss, yet his mind remained sharp. The warlord's army had been wiped out, the children freed, and the missionaries were alive. For the first time since the nightmare began, Rambo allowed himself a moment to breathe. But the fight wasn't over, not inside him. A silent battlefield. Rambo scanned the ruins of the Burmese compound. The wooden towers were shattered, walls blown apart, bodies scattered across the mud. It was a haunting scene, one he had seen countless times in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and countless forgotten conflicts. But this time, something felt different. He didn't just survive the battle, he shaped it. His mind replayed the last moments of the warlord, Major Tint, lying lifeless on the ground. For years, Rambo had lived as a man running from the violence inside him, a man who begged for a quiet existence, but when faced with pure evil, men who slaughtered villages, tortured innocents, and hunted children, Rambo had stepped forward with the same unstoppable fury that made him a legend. He had become the weapon again. Escape through the river. With the compound destroyed, Rambo turned toward the survivors, the missionaries and the Karen rebels. Their faces were a mixture of relief and shock. Some of them had never seen a soldier before, let alone one man take down an entire battalion. Michael Burnett stepped toward Rambo, eyes wide, voice trembling. "John, you saved all of us." Rambo didn't respond. Compliments never meant anything to him. Intentions didn't matter, only actions. Instead, he motioned toward the river. "We move now." The survivors helped the injured onto the long wooden boats. Rambo took the helm of one vessel, like he had done all his life. The current was strong, the river swelling from the storm, but compared to the firefight they had just survived, it felt oddly peaceful. As the boats floated away from the burning camp, the orange glow of the flames lit up the sky behind them. It looked like hell collapsing in on itself. Rambo stared straight ahead, but he could feel something shifting inside him. The beginning of an awakening. The constant struggle between violence and peace had always been a storm inside him, but now for the first time, he felt a sense of direction. He wasn't running anymore. The moment of hollow victory.
Hours later, after navigating through mud, fallen trees, and flooded swamps, the survivors finally reached the Karen village where their journey had first begun. But the sight awaiting them froze Rambo in place. The village was half burnt, huts destroyed, lives shattered. The warlord's men had attacked earlier that day. Grief poured from the remaining villagers. Children cried next to the bodies of their lost families. Mothers wailed in despair. The air reeked of smoke and sorrow. Sarah Miller, the missionary whose bravery had inspired Rambo to join the rescue, covered her mouth in shock. "Dear God, we were too late." Rambo didn't speak. He walked through the ruins slowly, his boots sinking into the wet earth. Every wounded villager he passed reminded him of the wars he had lived through, the helpless civilians caught in the crossfire, the innocent lives taken by men with power and weapons. He knelt beside the dying Karen rebel who had fought bravely against the Burmese. The man reached out, touching Rambo's arm weakly. "You came back. You fought with us." "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner." The rebel smiled faintly. "You came when it mattered." And with a final breath, he was gone. Rambo closed his eyes gently. This wasn't victory. This was survival. A prayer, a promise. The villagers gathered around the missionaries as they tended to the wounded. Sarah approached Rambo, her voice soft. "You saved so many lives today. You gave us hope." Rambo looked away. He always struggled with gratitude. To him, saving lives was not heroism, it was duty. He spoke quietly. "Live your lives, help them rebuild. That's what matters." Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "What about you? Where will you go?" Rambo didn't answer yet. Instead, he looked toward the jungle path that led back to the river, the same path that had brought him into this nightmare. Everything inside him felt heavy. The violence, the memories, the longing for something simpler, quieter, something he had run from for decades. Home. The Return Journey. A Man Who Found His Road. 2 days later, after ensuring the villagers were safe and the missionaries prepared for evacuation, Rambo packed his small bag, just a few tools, a knife, and his memories. He stood at the edge of the village as Sarah approached once more. "You're leaving," she said softly. Rambo nodded. "There's something I need to do." Sarah looked at him with a mixture of admiration and sadness. "I hope you find peace, John." His reply was quiet but sincere. "You gave me something to believe in." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the forest one last time. For years, Rambo had been a man adrift, a soldier without a war, a warrior without a home. But something about Sarah's gentle courage and the innocence of the villagers had awakened a piece of him he thought was dead, a piece that remembered who he once was. The final scene shifts dramatically from the dark jungles of Burma to the wide, open deserts of Arizona. Sunlight washes across endless roads. The sky is clear, peaceful, silent. A lone man walks down the dusty roadside. Tall, strong, wounded but alive. A duffel bag over his shoulder, his long hair tied back, eyes steady. John Rambo. As he moves forward, a wooden mailbox slowly comes into view. A name is painted on it. R. Rambo. He stops. His eyes soften. This is it. The place he left behind decades ago. The place he never thought he would see again. He walks toward the small ranch at the end of the dirt path. Horses graze quietly. The trees sway in the breeze. It's calm, warm, peaceful. A place where war cannot follow. The camera pulls back as Rambo steps onto the land, his land. The music rises softly, echoing the pain and triumph of a lifetime of struggle. For the first time in years, Rambo isn't running. He isn't fighting. He isn't surviving. He's coming home.